how many of you don't believe in climate change or the science of climate change? Just raise your hand. Okay. Okay, one person, that's great. Raise your hand. Actually, it's a trick question. All of you should have raised your hand. Because it's not a belief system. Really important. And that question was set up by Karl Rove to make people who understood and were literate in climate look like believers, and the ones who denied it look like they were objective. Right? And so it's really important to understand that this is not about, as I said, belief or, people, the deniers out there are people who are the believers because they believe this 10,000-year period of climatic stability called the Holocene period is going to persist for many thousands of years ahead, and there's not one shred of scientific data to support that belief. So that's where we stand. For me, and I want to show you a few slides here, but for me, I've been aware of this issue since 1974 in Stanford Research Institute when I was educated there about climate change, and I've watched it, and I felt like Bill McKibben and Al Gore and others, were such effective spokespersons and writers and authors. I never really got into the subject, but something changed for me. And I want to explain why, and why I did this book, or we did this book. And this is the north of Greenland, and there is a ice research station, the North Eemian Ice Research Station, which drills down through 2,500 meters of ice to the bedrock. And in those ice cores, they can detect CO2 levels, pollen counts, etc. They can describe pretty much what's going on the planet as a whole in the northern hemisphere, and they do the same in Antarctica to get this the sense of the southern hemisphere. And this is what it's like in summer. The sound could be a lot louder because it really is louder. And this is not an Airbnb hosting site, actually. And this is the ice cave where all the work is done. And citizen scientists from 14 nations go there. The week before we were there, a person who'd been there for 10 years became a double amputee because he got caught out in a whiteout. It's actually extremely dangerous to be here. And these scientists do incredible work, and this is where they work. And sorry for the phone being so raggedy, but I was really cold. So I was like, but I'll skip this and go to this, which is really the point. This is what they do. These are the ice cores. And what are they measuring? They're measuring the Eemian period, 125,000 years ago. And this is the Eemian period. And when you see the circle, that is the time that they were analyzing. What happened then? Well, what we know is there's 285 ppm, parts per million, of CO2 in the atmosphere. We know that the oceans were 20 to 30 feet higher. We know that hippopotamus and crocodiles were lounging in the Thames River Delta. There was no Kent, it was underwater. There was no Sussex, it was underwater. And we also know that lions and giraffes were romping through Denmark and Germany, and alligators were in Alaska. And that's 285 ppm, okay? And today, we are told we're at 407. Right? But actually, I don't have the animation right here, but this is where we are. We're at 490 ppm because 407 just counts carbon dioxide. 490 counts methane, hydrofluorocarbons, nitrous oxide, the other greenhouse gases, which actually have greater greenhouse warming potential than CO2. So, drawdown. Why drawdown? What does drawdown mean? Drawdown means the first time on a year-to-year basis, the greenhouse gases peak and go down. In other words, it's a reversal of what we're seeing here. And starting really in 2001, but definitely in 2009 when I was in Greenland, I kept saying, why are we talking about mitigation? Why are we talking about reduction? Why are we talking about stabilization? Do you see any stabilization there? Do you see? There's nothing. That's absolutely climate chaos. You know, and there's a lag time and so forth. So for me, I felt like we have to name the goal. If you don't name the goal, fat chance you're going to hit it. You're not going to hit it. And we're not naming the goal. The goal is to go back the other way. I mean, right now we're saying slow down, but it's sort of like Thelma and Louise in slow motion, you know. It says, okay, we'll go over this cliff more slowly. No, it doesn't make any sense at all. If you're going down the wrong road, slowing down doesn't make it the right road, right? So that's what Drawdown was about. And what we wanted to do was, you study this list while I talk about it, what we want to do is map, measure, and model the 100 most substantive solutions to reversing global warming. And when we say solutions, we mean solutions that are in place, working, W.W. Granger. We know how to do them, and they're all scaling. These are scaling solutions. In other words, they're all growing right now. So it isn't could be, should be's, or wannabes. These are, we are doing it. We know how to do it. We know the math. We know the engineering, and you can buy it. And we wanted to see if they continue to scale in a rigorous but reasonable way over 30 years, whether we hit that point where we could reverse global warming. That was Project Drawdown. That is Project Drawdown. And part of the reason we want to do this too is because of this list here. Here's 2 scientific organizations. And whether you're in the UK, Italy, or Mexico, and you Google the top solutions to climate change, this is the list you'll get. The first 2 hits. And if you look at this list, you know, you go, a power strip in my home entertainment center? I don't have a home entertainment center. In other words, I mean, and this is a union of concerned scientists. So what does this say to individuals? And most of these aren't solutions, they're proverbs. You know, they're like, yeah, but I mean, love your mother, forego fossil fuels. I mean, you know, it's kind of this thing, be efficient, you know, and eat smart. And, you know, it's like, and any individual knows reading this list going, oh man, this is not going to solve the problem. I should do these things, they're very good. I should love my mother and my dog. But this is not adequate to the task at hand. And then what you also get is this. We get news about global warming, right? And we get it in headlines. The science is good on the headline, but the way the science is presented is basically scare the pee out of you. Right? Just like the recent New York Magazine article, right? By David Wallace Wells. And so what happens is the news is about fear, threat, doom, you know. And then next to it, you know, you have clickbait, you know, which is, this one is the wife smashes husband's head with frog ornament and kept him mummified in layers of sheeting for 18 years, you know. And there it is. So there's a Tower Bridge going under in London, right? And then there's the wife, you can see her over there. There's the poor husband. And somehow they're on equal level, you know. And this is the internet, of course, but still, you know, the way it's presented is like one other thing. Oh, yeah, by the way, we're doomed. Next, thank you. And so you mix basically the sense of guilt that people have in terms of their inadequacy to address the problem. You mix it with fear and threat. And we know this from Psych 101. You stir well, mix well, and so forth, where you have basically numbness, denial, turning away, giving up, like, I don't know what to do. That's what you have. And that's what we have. So the communications around climate change and global warming has been just abysmal. The science is fantastic. But instead of just sort of pushing people's face into the science over and over and over again, we have to look at it differently. The IPCC is the best problem statement that humanity has ever done. Civilizationally speaking, the best. Incredible science. Every headline is the validation of the problem statement. If you know what the problem is, and it's well stated, then you should go right to the solutions. Okay, got it, thank you for sharing, let's solve the problem. And that's not what's going on. what's going on is somehow if we do rinse and repeat with civilization and society and talk more and more about the problems, that's going to solve the problem. It is not going to solve the problem. Talking about problems doesn't solve problems. And so we wanted to change that. And that's Drawdown. And we are an organization that is a nonprofit. We also I felt that if we did it, we had to do it as a coalition, as a collaboration, not as a small NGO that was doing the research. We couldn't have done it anyway as a small NGO. So we created a coalition, and we went all over the world looking for research fellows, and we got them from 22 countries, 6 continents, half PhDs, 40% women, all advanced degrees, White House fellows, Fulbright scholars, Rhodes scholars. I mean, we just put the word out, and the most amazing people in the world came, and for $1,000 wrote a master's thesis on one of the solutions that you have in the book. All right. And not only that, but did the tech review, the lit review, and then learned to use our models to model what would happen over 30 years. Extraordinary people. And we got 120 plus advisors. Some of these people you will know by name. And they advised us on content and everything else. And then we got 40 more outside expert science reviewers to review the models. So I just want you to know that information you're getting has been reviewed and reviewed and reviewed. And we only used peer-reviewed data for the carbon, and for the economic and other data, we used the IEA, International Energy Agency, the World Bank, the IPCC, the WHO, the FAO, YASA, ARENA. We use the most respected institutions in the world in terms of the economy, growth, business as usual scenarios, and so forth. So what you see in the book and what you'll see here is actually us reflecting back to the world what it knows, not what we know. It's what this bigger we, this is what we know. So I want you to look at it in that sense, as opposed to the way the media portrays us right now, especially with the incoming administration, is that we're sort of numb and we're stupid and we're greedy and we're venal and we don't care. It's not true. It's really not true at all. And this is what we do. We do the math, pure and simple. And I don't know why. Okay, you think about it. I mean, I learned about this in '74. So that's what, 43 years ago, right? Right? Climate change has been in the public sphere for at least 40 years. Right? No one has ever done this. No one's ever made a list of the most substantive solutions and did the analysis on the carbon side and the cost side for 40 years or before. I have no idea why. And I ask that question almost every week to myself. Must be a reason. So here we have the greatest problem that civilization will ever face, certainly faces, and we've never done the math. We've done the math on solar. We've done the math on EVs more and more. We've done the math on a few things for sure, but not on the complete list of what it is that we can do to reverse global warming. And so when you see the book, this has no content, but when you see this is solution geothermal. So you see a ranking. That is a ranking of two things. One is either of carbon emissions or CO2 equivalent emissions avoided. In other words, we didn't put them up there. We would have if we had done business as usual, a coal-fired plant, combined cycle gas, or that number is the gigatons of carbon that is sequestered. Right? In other words, brought down from the atmosphere back to Earth. And so that's that number. And then, there's the actual gigatons, 16.6 metric gigatons. And then there's net cost, which is compared to what? Well, again, combined cycle gas or coal. Was this more expensive or cheaper? In this case, where applicable, it's cheaper. And then similarly, the profit from it is $1.0 trillion. So we do a lot more than that, but in the book itself, we just have those 4 numbers. On the website, you can go to the methodology and how we figured it out and what were the assumptions and so forth. Details are there. And I just want to show you some of the solutions, just to give you a sense of the diversity. And if you listened to Al Gore last night in the Castro, you know about his new movie, it's solar, 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 wind, solar, 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 EVs in India. And as if somehow we did that and stopped eating meat, you know, and so much meat that we get a hall pass to the 22nd century. It's just not true. It's just not true. And why we keep focusing on those sort of charismatic technologies, I don't know. They're crucial technologies, but we need them all. Afforestation, this is high-speed rail. And I'm just going to just whiz through these. This is indigenous people's land management. Indigenous people are the best forest managers in the world. And indigene, the noun, means the original inhabitant in an environment. Okay, so indigenous is the adjective of indigene. This is rice, improved rice production, big methane emissions from rice because it's an anaerobic environment from water. And there's 2 methods where you actually take the water off the paddy and you actually increase productivity. It reduces your cost. It costs nothing to do it because it's just something you learn. Somebody teaches you from the next paddy. It's not, and it produces more rice. And this is onshore wind. And again, on the imagery side too, what we tried to tell stories on the verbal side in the book and narratives and so forth, but we also tried to do in imagery kind of blow the cliches out of the water, you know, in terms of, and here I just want to give a sense of scale. You know, just the scale is extraordinary. It's even much bigger now, actually. But what you normally see is a wind turbine on this grassy hill is wildflowers, you know, and there's a turbine up there, and there's a blue sky, and there's children playing in the background. You go, oh, God, it's just so great. This is the future. That is a terrible place to put a wind turbine. You can see this is number 2. This is, I don't know how this typo keeps creeping in, $7.43 trillion savings by 2050, not billion. But this is where you put a wind turbine in a really pissy area in terms of weather. This is the North Sea, Norfolk, Sheringham Shoal, Siemens 3 megawatt wind turbines. This is where they belong. And this is where they are so productive. And this is offshore wind. This is an Uros woman in Lake Titicaca who lives on a straw island that has to be replenished every 90 days or it sinks. And her 2 daughters. And this is rooftop solar. And again, you know, her grin is because she was using kerosene on her straw island so her daughters could study at night, right? And in Drawdown, we really want to emphasize too that not just the narrowness of carbon, that these solutions have so many cascading benefits for humanity. This is number 10. This is the Kermode Bear in the Great Bear Forest in British Columbia. The important number there is the amount of CO2 that is there in the biomass and underneath the forest in the ground. Let's keep it there. It's a lot of carbon. This is clean cook stoves. Again, not only the health of the environment, black carbon, but also health for that woman and her children. This is from Ethiopia. This is a Dasanak woman who, at her village, they built a bridge from Kenya, and they built a bar for the men who were building the bridge, and they would go over every day and pick up all the stuff the men were throwing away, SIM cards and watch bands and bottle caps. And then they made jewelry and headdresses, and now they sell them to boutiques in France. So this is household recycling, not a blue bin. Again, it was like we wanted to sort of show a global sense of what people are doing, can do, and to break the stereotypes, which are actually pretty boring. And this is managed grazing, and this is a simple solution. Actually, you let animals do what they would do in the wild, which is they are prey animals, so they protect themselves by herding from predators to protect the old and the young, and they eat quickly, and they don't want to stand in their pee and poop, and they move on. They can't do that in a fenced pasture. They can do that if they're moved and moved and moved. If they're moved every 2, 3, 4 days, then you get tremendous carbon sequestration, you get more productivity, the land gets healthier, you get more water retention, the vet bills go down. If you do it the other way, then it's the opposite. Vet bills go up, carbon is emitted from the land, same cows, same cattle, but 2 different results according to how you manage that. This is electric bike, and this is biochar. Keep going. This is the former accounting firm for the Oscars, PricewaterhouseCoopers. The guy's waving is in Montreal. The guy on the iPad on the Segway is actually from Prague, and he just logs on. He just logs on from Prague, and then scoot around the office and go to your office, or maybe come in the door here or whatever, and attend meetings and conferences or whatever and so forth. So this is a telepresence. This is a transport solution. This is about shipping ideas instead of protoplasm, which is kind of what we're doing right now by beaming and live streaming this, right? And then what we did is a bunch of coming attractions, and these are solutions that are valid scientifically, but have not been, they're not economically present, and so they're sort of right on the horizon. And what we're trying to do here is to show that even though we modeled 80 solutions that are present, extant, working, we wanted to show that humanity is on the case, that they're brilliant, that they're imaginative, that we know what we're doing, that we actually can solve this problem. And marine permaculture is big frames put under the sea with recycled PET, which doesn't break down in salt water, and you have these pumps that are self-actuating by the rise and fall of seawater that go down to the thermocline and bring up the cold, nutrient-laden waters and create this trophic cascade of phytoplankton, zooplankton, and algae, and kelp, and forage fish, and feeder fish, etc. It does it in weeks. You get this in weeks. This isn't months you're looking at here. This is 3 weeks. It's amazing. And it's important because the natural ocean circulation is being suppressed. 93 to 97%, there's different figures, of the heat that is increasing on the planet is going into the oceans, not on the land, into the oceans. And so what's happening is suppressing, big heat blankets are in the ocean, and it's suppressing the natural circulation. So this brings it back and deacidifies the ocean. Nothing sequesters carbon faster than kelp, nothing. And it cools the water. It can prevent coral bleaching. It brings back fish to fisheries or fisher folk along coasts. It's a win-win-win-win-win-win solution. This is repopulating the mammoth steppe. 2 brilliant biologists in Siberia. Basically, we extirpated all the animals pretty much in the mammoth steppe, that subarctic circle. And they used to be there, obviously the woolly mammoth, but the musk ox and wolves and the Yakutian horses and so forth. It was a lot of animals there. When you bring them back, what happens, they're ruminants, they're grass-eating animals, and they brush away the snow in the winter in the dark to eat, to survive the minus 100-degree temperatures, minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Get out of here. And they cool the land. When they brush the snow off, the temperature of the land goes down 2 degrees centigrade. And I'm sure you've read about the permafrost, and if that melts, then it's game over. That's true, by the way. And so this is a permafrost protection plan. This is hydrogen boron fusion. Fusion is a place where we basically dig big holes and put government taxpayer money in it and bury it and never see it again. And say, but don't worry, it's 30 years out. We're going to get there. You know, we've been saying that for 40 years. So this company was is in Rancho Margarita, and it was in stealth for 17 years because they didn't want anybody to know about them. They're well funded, $500 million. I mean, and I was at Google X this morning talking about them, and Google's actually involved with them, but the people at Google X did not know that they were involved. But what's interesting is you all are in there's a lot of techies there and here and so forth, and you know there's a lot of turnover. Nobody leaves this company. There's 140 people. No one leaves. They know it's going to work. They have one more milestone to go. I've been following it for 11 years, and they've hit every single milestone they've set, and they have one more to go. We'll see. But it's baseload power. It's clean. If the reactor goes down, you can start it with a Honda generator. Couldn't be safer. And you use borax, basically. They say if you buy the reactor, they'll give you fuel free, but you can buy it at the store. It's so cheap. And this is building with wood. I was in London at the Grenfell fire. I don't know if you read about the fire there, just horrific. In fact, the very morning I was giving a talk at the Royal Society of Arts, and the fire was, of course, still smoldering. Wood buildings are safer than steel and concrete buildings in a fire. You go, no. Not possible. It's possible. And you can read the book and get the references, citations, and go on the website. But it's so interesting how these are actually, the Grenfell Tower would not have burned if it had been built of wood. And but it has a huge impact on sequestering carbon and on emissions. And this is the last coming attraction I want to share. We have many more, but I call a cow walks onto a beach. And Panda Bear walks into a bar, right? It's like, what is this joke? This one is a farmer in Prince Edward Island who noticed the cows that were eating seaweed produce more milk. And the question is why? I mean, and he asked his county agent who didn't know, who asked a scientist who said he had a theory that the dairy cows weren't producing as much methane. Methane production is huge, you know, in cows and dairy cow and cattle, sheep and goats too, but it's actually not necessary. That what's going on in the ruminant, you know, of a ruminant, a cow, a cattle, is actually due to some bacteria that got in, you know, a million years ago or whatever, and made itself home. Okay, and produces, it's a methanogenesis, produces methane. So they fed some seaweed, and some of the cows they fed none, and they put plastic bags over their head every 5 days and measured exhalations, and sure enough, methane went down. And except who's going to gather kelp from a beach and feed it to cows? So that's a science project. So they started to look for other substances, and he met a scientist in Queensland in Australia. And now you see articles on it, and there's papers. I saw one yesterday. But they discovered an algae called Asparagopsis taxiformis, which if fed in a 2% quantity to cattle or cows, dairy cows, reduces methane emissions by 70 to 90%, which is a huge contributor to greenhouse gases. And remember the marine permaculture frame you saw, the first one? They're talking now, and they formed a business to grow Asparagopsis taxiformis on marine permaculture frames. Quite a combination. What surprised us? Everything. The whole list did. The number one sector was food. 8 of the 20 top solutions were food. This whole area is in what we call the who knew category. Like, we certainly didn't, by the way. Had no idea. The number 4 solution is a plant-rich diet, which is really not vegetarian. If you want it, it is, by the way. But it's actually a diet that is more infused with plant proteins for sure, but also the main thing is to reduce the amount of protein that's being eaten in the north and developed countries. And actually we modeled the increase of protein where it's inadequate. And same with caloric content. Even then, it's number 4. The number 3 solution is reduce food waste. And this is conservative. And I want to say something about that. All our numbers are conservative. We chose them so that nobody could go after us and say we egged the pudding or whatever. And in this case, we did not measure the methane emissions from food that's placed in landfills because we couldn't. We didn't figure out how to do it. So if you look at the sectors, the food sector is bigger than, it says energy, but it's actually the energy electrical generation sector. It's not liquid fuels. And land use 3, and women and girls 4, and then we'll get to women and girls, and materials in buildings and cities. Materials is number 1, refrigeration management, HFCs. Why? Because they're 5,000 to 9,000 times more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas, that's why. And they leak everywhere, especially in developing countries. And when they're decommissioned, they're just emitted. And this is a huge solution. But this one is energy, and energy is 5 of the top 20. If you add 22, which you see on the bottom, then onshore and offshore wind together become the number 1 solution, not refrigerant management. However, we have this little cutie. This is called educating girls. And it's the number 6 solution. And girls are, there's 60, 70 million girls are taken out of school and early marriage by culture, by family, by custom, by practicality, whatever. And usually at puberty or pre-puberty, and they have an average of 5+ children, okay? If a girl is allowed to keep going and matriculate to 11th, 12th grade, she's a very, she becomes a woman on her terms, or more her terms, not somebody else's. Her rate of reproduction is 2+, but just a replacement rate. Her children benefit from her education. She earns more. They get more resources. They duplicate their mother's behavior. We've known this for 40 years, by the way. This is not new data. And she accesses family planning, or she plans her family, whichever way you want to look at it. The number 7 solution is family planning. And they're both the same thing, actually, the same solution, except the pathways to it are different. One's educating girls, and one is providing clinics everywhere in the world, including this country, by the way, where women can get support for their reproductive health, their family, and choices. And like together, though, if you add these two together, the number 1 solution to reversing global climate change or global warming is the empowerment of girls and women, not a solar panel. And again, we didn't know this was going to be the outcome, by the way. We have a methodology that prevented bias. We had lots of bias. Believe me, I would have made a list of the top 5 or 10 solutions at a drop of a hat, and because I knew, right? I was wrong. I was wrong. And so I think one of the impacts of Drawdown is really to sort of reframe, really, how we think of it. This is what the solutions look like in a pie chart. And I just want to say, actually go back, there's no such thing as a small solution. A system causes it. This is the system solution, you know, and there's nothing small. We tend to focus on the big ones, but we should focus on all of them. Is Drawdown possible? This is simply the Earth, you know, CO2 emissions, and over 12 months. It's an old one. NASA did it, simulation, 2006. It's pretty much the same. The darker the red, the more CO2 emissions. And of course, it's in the north where people are in the winter, and obviously there are going to be more CO2 emissions, and from coal, from gas, from heat, cars, whatever. But what happens is you see, starting in May, you start to see it change. You start to see little wisps of blue, the red starts to recede, and what you're seeing is O2, you're seeing oxygen, actually, and you're seeing the carbon, the CO2 disappear. And that's because it's springtime, the trees are leaving, the farmers are planting, you know, I mean, photosynthesis. The point of this is really, we'll keep going, on time, is that drawdown happens every year, 6 to 7 ppm. It goes up and goes down 6 to 7 ppm. So drawdown is an annual event. So what we're talking about is actually not so radical as it seems. Like, oh, drawdown, it seems so remote. And no, it's just about getting the difference between anthropogenic emissions from combustion of fossil fuels or land use to not be greater than the amount of carbon that is naturally recycled by the environment. And just a quick one: the book, the title, it was titled by a Stanford intern at Penguin, not me. He wrote it as a verso for the back of the book, and I looked at it and said, "That's so brash, no way." And but then I thought about it, and I thought it was right. It is the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming, because nobody's ever proposed one. So I thought, yeah, absolutely. Any adjective you want to put there is true. The most whatever. And the plan thing I want to address. It's not our plan. It's our plan. In other words, we, as I said at the beginning, we reflect back to the world what it knows and what it's doing. So it's not like we, a small group of people, know what we ought to do. We don't even have advocacy in this book. We're just saying, look what we know, look what we're doing, and look what happens if we continue to scale. We can reverse global warming within most of your lifetime. Maybe not me. And this one I love. This is one of our great scientists. And but you remember that part, I could probably read it, but I think I know it by heart, at the end of the movie where he has a wannabe astronaut, and he goes in there and he's kind of stern. He said, listen up, like when you go up there, you're going to reach a point, absolutely, you're going to die. It's going to happen to you. He said, absolutely, it's going to happen to you. And when that happens, he said, you have a choice. You can either accept it, or he said, you can do the math. Remember? I love that part. Do the math. So you can do the math, and you solve one problem, and then another problem, and if you solve enough problems, you get to come home. And you guys are about home. And this is about coming home. Reversing global warming is about coming home. If we don't, even if we stay right where we live, we will be homeless. We won't recognize the environment, the weather, the creatures, the bugs. We won't recognize it. So this is about humanity coming home. And I just wanted to show you one more thing. I got going a little bit too long. This takes 2 minutes. This is a video done by Interface, a company that was headed by Ray Anderson, famous for his leadership and sustainability. And he died 5 years ago, and they hired 2 years ago a new CEO who is a Republican, who's a Trump supporter, and a climate denier. And we felt at the time like, wow, okay. And Janine and myself and other on the environmental team are going, all right. But it was to set the environmental goal. And so we met and to do that. And the first day we went around and just said what we're doing. And he was sort of knocked out, like the breadth, the depth, the governments, the leaders, the CEOs, the companies, the institutions that all four of us were engaged in on these issues. It really blew his circuits, I think, or, he saw us in a very different light than as opposed to a greenie, so forth. And we certainly saw him in a different light. He's just a great human being, and not with tags or labels. And the next day, we were there to create a new 20-year plan goal for Interface. And the 20-year goal had been net zero, which is zero emissions, zero waste. And they're 91% there, so they needed to set the goal for beyond 2020. And he came back the next morning and said the goal was to reverse global warming. And we were like, what? And so the video I want to show you, he made it, he wrote it, he chose the music. We have to choose, because the music isn't licensed for the internet, we have to turn the music off for people but you can hear it. So this is cool to tell people not to hear something, but they're not. But it still works without the music, but it works better with the music. And so I want you to see it in that context. This is a video he did for the 7,000 employees of Interface. It wasn't meant to be shown. I don't know if he knows I'm showing it. So last week in London, they invented carpet tiles, the squares. That's their invention. They showed a carpet tile that instead of emitting or causing 6 pounds of CO2 per tile, actually sequesters 2 pounds per tile. So they're on it, they're doing it. We can all do that. We can all change what we do, how we do it in such a way that we reverse global warming. Thank you so much.
Paul, thank you so much. We're going to do a question and answer period here, but before jumping into that, just wanted to make a quick comment. That was fantastic. Our mission at Airbnb is so that anyone can belong anywhere, but obviously that doesn't take place unless there's a planet for people to continue to be able to live on and to be able to share, as you talked about. So, really profound. Thank you for that. I'd like to ask Pete Lydon to come up. Pete is someone I've gotten to know, really well over the last year or so. He works with us at Airbnb, but a little bit of background on Pete. Pete started off in journalism, was a journalist for Newsweek when people still read news on a weekly basis, but has also been in the sort of front end of journalism in terms of where it is going. Was one of the founding editors of Wired magazine when Wired emerged as really the publication covering tech when it began to explode, particularly in the late 90s, and and early 2000s. We've gotten to know Pete working with him through Reinvent, which is the company that he created. And Reinvent really is at the intersection of modern day journalism, content, technology, showcasing big thinkers like Paul. And you've been working with us for, as I said, the last year or so, helping us think about some of these issues. So thank you for all that you've done, and have a little conversation now.
Fantastic. I see what you mean. He's a good spokesperson. We're going to make this as tight as we can here, because we know we started a little bit late here. But in working with you folks here, we do a project. We've got a public project out there called The Future of Sharing, where we're looking at the future of the sharing economy and how it can be improved, how it can work for everyone. And Airbnb has been partnered with us on that, and it's been really a way to push forward in some new thinking. And so all what we've been doing in that space, and then seeing what you've been doing here, I did want to just try to tie it a little bit to this community, just like Interface kind of was trying to tie what you're saying to their community. So where do you see kind of the sharing of underutilized assets as fitting in, if and at all, in this kind of larger picture of how do we reinvent the world at some level?
Well, we do model ride sharing, and we do in the coming attractions model AVs. With or without the driver, both. And I mean, ride sharing, Lyft, a la Lyft, a la Uber, then also AVs without a driver, of course. I think that the sharing that we desperately need is that our identity is so intertwined with each other, and basically we have a culture that really shows or tries to teach us that we should get ahead, at the expense of others. And it's especially in this country, but really all over the world. I see it everywhere. I know Chris travels a lot, and you see this huge polarization of income and resources, really, and the inequities are actually growing. They're not coming closer. So the thing about a sharing economy, in whatever way is made manifest or defined, is not just about the resources or being underutilized and not being better utilized, which is a great thing in terms of material. I think, what is it after? I thought some number where, I think after, I don't know how many years, Airbnb became the largest hotel chain in the world. Bigger than Intercontinental, with no capital cost. I forget what the data was. But so that is on the material side. But there's another side to that, really, which is the spirit, the human spirit, which is, can we create a world where that is about interchange? And we think of transactions as being buy-sell, but there's a deeper level of us exchanging who we are, what we do, what we stand for, what we make, what we offer, that the world desperately needs right now in order to lower consumption, frankly, and to increase experiences, increase enjoyment, increase connectivity, increase the way people understand each other. We're in a divisive era, brought about inadvertently, I think, by the internet, actually. I think it was always there in some ways, but we need the antidote to that, and the only antidote really is person to person, to listening, to being, to interchanging with others in different cultures and places.
You touched on a lot of themes that actually do surface. I think, I don't want to speak for Chris or you folks here, but really emphasizing this openness to connect people, this kind of experiential side of technology, bringing people together as much as possible, and then again, the utilizing these underutilized resources. The other piece of it is that it's really a global project, and this is a global company, and it's got scale. And when you said you were talking down at Google and other places. I mean, is there a kind of special responsibility you see to tech companies or ones that have this kind of scale to try to provide some kind of leadership or inspiration in these kind of issues?
You can look at it as a responsibility. You can look at it as an opportunity, really. I see it more as a blessing, not as a responsibility, which is when you're that cross-cultural, where's your boundaries at Airbnb, You don't have them. There's only one boundary that counts, and that's the atmosphere. The rest of them are artificial, and human-made. And so the fact that you're boundaryless, gives Airbnb a kind of what's the word? What's the noun I'm looking for? Not just a voice, but and that's not a platform, but a way of being in the world, that cuts across, again, the polemics and the differences that are magnified and accelerated by the media. And that's what the media does. It loves conflict, it loves difference, and it loves to foment conflict because it improves readership, but it actually doesn't make the society a better place. And so Airbnb is just the opposite, right? And it's like a healing, it's like a balm, it's like a salve, it's like, and where the differences are actually exalted. Like you go here and here's the host and this is the place and this is what they do and this is what you get and this is what you see, and it's like, so it's the differences become actually the attraction as opposed to the distraction.
I do want to leave an opportunity here with 5 minutes to kind of grab a couple questions here too, and I have a final one here. The person in the back there, quick. We're going to run the mic up there, so because there's folks outside the office and also on the net here.
Sorry. So I have two kind of annoying questions. The first one is consumer and individual responsibility is usually manifests as an appeal to consumerism, like buy green. Is that actually a sustainable way forward versus making more of an appeal towards corporate and institutional responsibility and choices being made for you? And the second question is that information is more abundant than ever, and we have less of an idea how to actually filter through it as a public. So with so much climate skepticism, how do you think public messaging needs to change? Or is it a question of not being about public messaging at all?
To the first question, we can't model consumption or changes in behavior, or we would, that would be a solution, but you can't model it. And so there's solutions there that we don't model. In terms of green versus non-green consumption, whatever, consumption is consumption. And one of my criticisms really of Silicon Valley is basically, most of it is powered by consumption, that is advertising. And to get people to buy more and to buy your product and buy it more often. And so let's be real, in terms of that. Facebook and Google are powered by advertising. And that's the business model. There's other business models. You have one. So it's not the only business model, but I'm just saying that much of the industry is driven by materialism, and that I don't know how long that is sustainable itself, whether it's green or ungreen, I don't think it is. To your second point, in terms of communication, I feel like the communication that's occurred, and is occurring right now about climate, is about 2 degrees, 2C. You see it all the time. You can't go past 2C, and what's going to happen? Oh, it's hell, and this is being reinforced over and over and over again. 2C means nothing to 99.999% of the people in the world. It's just like, get out of here. I have a family, I have a home, or I have a farm, or I have this, and so forth. My children need to go to school, they don't have shoes, or whatever it is. I have a mortgage, my mother has Alzheimer's, whatever. That doesn't register. And so basically the climate movement is gone through I call it the locked back door of humanity. And that locked back door is made of 2 things. One is that kind of communication, which is, conceptual, abstract, not human or humane. And the other one is the on top of that, the scientists, the psychologists, and say, and the human brain isn't wired to deal with future existential threats. And then the climate movement keeps doing future existential threats and not listening to itself because it doesn't work. And the front door of humanity is wide open. And if you want to go to human beings, go to how the brain actually works. And the way the human brain works, for very good reason, is short-term. Okay, so what does humanity need? They need jobs. They need living wage jobs. They need jobs with dignity. They need jobs to give a person a sense that they have value in the world, and they're adding value to their family, their pride, they have pride, to their community, and to the future. That is innately what human beings are and want to do. And instead, we're the only species without full employment. Think about it. Every other species is fully employed, happily so. And we keep persisting to create a system that obviates and marginalizes human beings. So the way in to reversing global warming and to addressing climate change is what I call regenerative development, which is we have so many things to do. Never has so much work needed to be done. Never in history. So much to restore, to renew, to rebuild, to rehabilitate, to share, to give, to support, and so forth. And somehow we've gotten all screwed up, our economic system, which is basically going the other direction. So to me, the communication should be about, look what's possible. Rather than seeing climate change as a burden, like, gee, I got the short end of the stick, I was born at the wrong time. I mean, rather than seeing yourself as an object, because anytime you see yourself as an object, that's a heck of a bad life. You're the subject of your life, and so forth. So when you look at climate change, what is it? It's feedback, systemic feedback. Any system, this is a system. Airbnb is a system. It doesn't pay attention to feedback, it dies as a company. We know that's absolutely true about any system. So climate is the system that's giving us feedback. It's a gift. It's an offering. It is not a curse. And it's asking, telling us, showing us that we can imagine, create a far better world than the one we're in right now. And we know how to do it. And so the communication has to be about possibility, about kindness, about generosity, about innovation, about imagination, about, really, to celebrate what it means to be a human being, as opposed to fear, doom, threat, gloom, guilt, shame. So that's my take on it. And that's why if you look in the book, we don't blame anybody. We don't demonize. We don't point fingers. We don't shame. What's the point? To me, everybody's innocent. Everybody. Until they know something, and then they make a choice. But to look at the world as good and bad and all that sort of stuff, I know, go back and say, oh, it's ISIS and this and that. But to me, there's inherent innocence in all human beings, And their true nature may be completely screwed up by their education, their surrounding, propaganda, by the media, etc., for sure. But underneath there is always a really good human being. And that's who we got to appeal to. And that's how we have to message this.
I know there's a lot of questions, but Chris, what do you think? We have to probably... We want to leave a little time also for him to sign books here, but here...
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that Paul's generously agreed to sign some books here. So I think folks who have more questions, we can do it in that context, if you're comfortable with that, Paul. Yeah, sure. I'll ask one last one if I could, since I got the microphone here. At some level, we drink our own Kool-Aid here, or I guess I should say we drink our own recycled Kool-Aid so that we're being appropriate. But you touched on something I thought was just got me thinking, something Pete and I have talked about, which is this ethos that you're sort of getting at, and then talked about some of the corporate models that currently exist, and our platform model. As part of the solution here, finding business models or platform models that more closely align that basic human ethos that you talked about with consumers, with business. I mean, for us, we like to think that we only succeed if, as a platform, if our hosts do well. Our hosts only do well if the traveler does well. The traveler only does well if ultimately those cities and communities feel like they're benefiting from it. It sort of aligns things in a little bit of a different way than maybe companies optimizing for a quarterly earning. And you've seen this ethos really, over the last 40, 50 years, right? You went from end of World War II, where there was an ethos in investing in people, to then downsizing to maximize, to then outsourcing, to offshoring, and now to just replacing people all together. And so as part of this, ultimately, and maybe this is leading the witness, I don't mean to, but we have to sort of think about how these platforms actually align themselves with society better.
We do. We have to think about what people are going to do. We have AI coming that does the same thing as we've been doing for the last 30, 40 years, which is using less and less of what we have more of, human beings. And to do so, we use more and more of what we have less of, resources. And that's upside down and backwards. We want to use more and more of what we have more of, which is human beings, their value, their intelligence, their, in order to use less and less of what we have less of, which is resources. And so essentially we want to build an economy that instead, right now we have an economy that steals the future. It's stealing it from our children and selling it in the present and calling it GDP. We can just as easily build an economy that heals the future and sells it in the present as GDP. It's our choice. But it's not a choice unless we have that possibility, unless we have that as a model, and we don't right now. And I think that's what you guys can do. I think any platform that actually really connects people, that really connects them, not just posts. That's not a connection. So all due respect, I post, and so you do, but it's not really a connection. Connection is a deeper one, and it can be distant like an Airbnb, or it can be local, very neighborhood. It doesn't matter. It's a real connection, and that is what we need the internet to do. That's what we need our platforms to do, in a meaningful way, because I just feel like when you actually, and this goes back to that video you saw, that came out because we listened. He listened because everyone listened. He tweets me now and say, "Did Scott Pruitt fall off a turnip truck? What's going on with it?" He's completely changed. Nobody tried to change him. Nobody tried to change his mind. We listened respectfully, and he listened respectfully, and that's what happened, and that's what can only happen when we have that connection, that quality of connection. Yeah.
That's great. I think that's a great way to end this. Thanks, everyone. Paul's going to hang out for a little bit. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, thank you for organizing this. Pete, thank you for your help. And Paul,
Thank you, Chris.
I think I certainly, speaking for myself, feel like I'm smarter after having listened to this. I may have been a low bar in my case, but I think all of us are smarter as a result of this. Thank you.
It's a high bar. Thank you so much.